Jasmine Crockett stood at the witness table, the bright lights of the Senate hearing room illuminating her bold red blazer. The freshman congresswoman from Texas gripped her notes tightly as Senator Mitt Romney leaned forward, his silver hair perfectly styled, his face stern with disapproval. "Congressman Crockett," as Romney said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber, "I'm looking at your resume, and frankly, I have serious concerns about your qualifications to speak on this matter. What exactly makes you think your limited experience prepares you for this role?" The crowd gasped. Other committee members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The live camera feed zoomed in on Crockett's face, capturing the flash of surprise in her eyes. Romney continued, his tone dismissive. "You've been in Congress, barely a year, and before that just a brief stint as a state representative? Perhaps you should defer to those with more substantial experience." For a moment, the room went completely silent. Reporters leaned forward, phones ready to capture what would surely become the day's headline. Romney sat back, a slight smile on his lips, clearly believing he'd put the young congresswoman in her place. But then Crockett adjusted her microphone, took a deep breath, and what happened next left everyone in that hearing room completely speechless, especially Mitt Romney. Before we dive into what Crockett said that stunned Romney into silence, like this video and subscribe to our channel for more political showdowns that the mainstream media won't show you. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Mitt Romney and Jasmine Crockett couldn't have come from more different worlds. Romney, the 76-year-old senator from Utah, carried himself with the confidence of old money and establishment power. The son of a former governor, graduate of Harvard Business School and Harvard Law, former CEO of Bain Capital, and one-time Republican presidential nominee worth hundreds of millions, today he sat at the raised dais of the Senate Judiciary Committee, wearing an impeccable Navy suit that probably cost more than what many Americans make in a month. His reputation as a moderate Republican who occasionally criticized Trump had earned him praise from centrists, but deepening suspicion from his own party. "Senator Romney," whispered a staff member, sliding a folder in front of him. Additional background on Representative Crockett. Romney nodded curtly, barely glancing at the folder. He didn't need notes to know what he thought of Crockett. To him, she represented everything changing too fast in America. New voices demanding space at tables where they hadn't traditionally been welcome. Across the room sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, 42, a first-term Democratic representative from Dallas, Texas. Before coming to Congress, she'd been a civil rights attorney and served in the Texas House of Representatives. Known for her straightforward speaking style and unwillingness to back down from confrontation, Crockett had quickly made a name for herself among progressives since arriving in Washington. Today's hearing was supposed to be a routine discussion about judicial nominations, but Romney had unexpectedly turned it into a referendum on Crockett herself. The stakes were high. For Romney, this was about maintaining the status quo, asserting the primacy of traditional experience. For Crockett, this was about proving she belonged in these halls of power, despite not following the conventional path to get there. But more importantly, this was about whose voice deserved to be heard in America's corridors of power. Behind them, the gallery was packed with reporters, staffers, and citizens. C-SPAN cameras captured every moment. The committee chairman, sensing tension rising, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Senator Romney," he said, "I believe you have 5 minutes for questioning." Romney leaned forward. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congresswoman Crockett, let's talk about experience, shall we?" The room grew quiet as Romney prepared his first real attack. Crockett straightened her papers, her eyes narrowing slightly, already formulating the response that would soon stun everyone watching. "Congressman Crockett," Romney began, his voice carrying the practiced precision of a man accustomed to boardrooms and debate stages. "Your biography states you've been in Congress for approximately 14 months. Is that correct?" Crockett leaned toward her microphone. "Yes, Senator. I was elected in November 2022 and sworn in January 2023. Romney nodded slowly, making a show of consulting his notes. "And before that, you served in the Texas State Legislature for just one term, 2 years?" "That's correct, Senator. And your legal career, you were a relatively unknown attorney before entering politics, isn't that right?" No major national cases that I can see here. Romney gestured vaguely at the papers before him. The committee chairman glanced nervously between them. Other senators on the dais exchanged looks. Senator Durbin leaned over to whisper something to Senator Klobuchar, who frowned deeply. Crockett's expression remained composed, but those watching closely noticed her grip tighten on her pen. I practiced civil rights law in Texas for over a decade, Senator Romney. I represented hundreds of clients in cases that mattered deeply to them, even if they didn't make national headlines. Romney's smile tightened. Yes, well, that's precisely my point. We're discussing federal judicial nominations today, lifetime appointments that will shape American law for generations. Don't you think this requires input from those with substantial experience in major legal matters? Perhaps more seasoned members of Congress? A murmur rippled through the gallery. Senator Warren visibly rolled her eyes. From the press section, several reporters began typing furiously on their phones. With all due respect, Senator, Crockett replied, her voice steady but with an edge creeping in. I'm not sure what definition of substantial experience you're using, but Romney cut her off. I'm using the definition most Americans would recognize, Congresswoman. Major cases, significant legislative accomplishments, a track record that demonstrates readiness for these responsibilities. He turned slightly toward the cameras. The fact is, many of us worked decades to earn our place at this table. Some of us managed businesses, governed states, ran for president. We didn't arrive overnight. The racial and generational subtext hung in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Senator Booker shifted forward, looking like he wanted to interject, but the chairman shook his head slightly. Senator Romney, Crockett began again, if you're suggesting, I'm not suggesting anything. Congresswoman, I'm stating facts. Romney's tone grew sharper. Your party rushed you forward as a voice on matters where frankly your limited experience raises questions. Take judicial philosophy. Have you ever argued before the Supreme Court? Have you written scholarly articles on constitutional law? Have you served as a judge? The tension in the room rose, palpably. Cameras panned between Romney's confident smirk and Crockett's increasingly rigid posture. The American people deserve representatives who bring substantive experience to these discussions, Romney continued, warming to his theme, not just those who speak loudly or happen to check certain demographic boxes. A collective intake of breath swept through the room. The chairman looked alarmed, reaching for his microphone, but Romney continued, Congresswoman, I have your voting record here. He held up a document. In your brief time in Congress, you voted along party lines 97% of the time. No major legislation authored, no significant bipartisan initiatives. So I'll ask directly, what specific qualifications do you bring to this critical discussion that more experienced members don't already provide? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Crockett. Romney sat back, clearly believing he'd delivered a knockout blow to the freshman representative's credibility. The chairman cleared his throat. The Congresswoman may respond. Crockett took a deep breath. The cameras zoomed in on her face as she organized her thoughts. The moment stretched out. The tension building. Whatever she said next would either salvage her reputation or confirm Romney's dismissal. She leaned toward the microphone and began the response that would soon explode across social media and news networks nationwide. Thank you for the opportunity to respond, Senator Romney, Crockett began, her voice calm but resonating with a clarity that immediately commanded attention. The room fell completely silent. You've asked about my qualifications and experience, so let me tell you exactly who I am and what I bring to this table. She sat up straighter, setting aside her notes. I'm a civil rights attorney who spent my career representing Americans who couldn't afford high-priced lawyers from Harvard. While some spent their careers helping corporations get richer, I was in courtrooms fighting for people who had been wrongfully arrested, illegally evicted, or denied their constitutional rights. Romney's smile began to fade as Crockett hit her stride. You mentioned that I haven't argued before the Supreme Court. That's true. But I've argued in courtrooms where my clients' entire lives hung in the balance. Not corporate mergers or tax strategies, but whether someone would lose their freedom, their home, or their children. Senator Warren nodded approvingly. Several staffers in the back exchanged glances. You suggest I lack experience because I've only been in Congress for 14 months. But in those 14 months, Senator, I've authored 27 amendments, served on 4 committees, maintained a 100% voting attendance record, and held over 60 town halls with my constituents. Crockett pulled out a folder of her own. And since you brought up voting records, Senator Romney, I took the liberty of reviewing yours. Romney shifted uncomfortably as Crockett opened the folder. You've missed 5% of votes in this congressional session alone. That's well above the Senate median of 4%. And while you question my 97% party line voting, your own record shows 92% alignment with Republican leadership, except, interestingly, on votes related to former President Trump, where your courage seems to come and go depending on political wins. Gasps and a few scattered chuckles erupted from the gallery. Romney's face began to redden. But perhaps most relevant to today's discussion, Crockett continued, her voice gaining strength, is your apparent confusion about what qualifies someone to speak on judicial matters. She pulled out a document and held it up. This is my record as an attorney. Over 800 cases in both state and federal courts. I've litigated constitutional issues, voting rights cases, and housing discrimination suits. I've represented clients before judges across the political spectrum. I've seen firsthand how judicial philosophy affects real people's lives. Romney started to interject, but Crockett pressed on. You mentioned your business experience, Senator. Running Bain Capital is certainly impressive, but with respect, sir, how exactly does leveraging companies with debt, extracting profits, and sometimes leaving workers jobless prepare you to evaluate federal judges? I'm genuinely curious. The room erupted in murmurs. Senator Sanders could be seen suppressing a smile. And yes, you ran for president, Senator. You lost. Crockett's words hung in the air. I respect anyone who puts themselves forward for public service, but losing a presidential election isn't itself a qualification. Romney's face had turned stone cold. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. You spoke of checking demographic boxes, Senator. Crockett's voice now carried a steely edge. I wonder if you've considered that perhaps your own box, wealthy, white, male, politically connected, has been checked automatically for most of American history? My presence here isn't about checking boxes. It's about finally unchecking the box that said only people like you get to make decisions for all Americans. The chairman tried to interject. The senator's time. I'm responding to the senator's question, Mr. Chairman, Crockett said firmly. He asked about my qualifications, and I believe he deserves a complete answer. The chairman nodded reluctantly, and Romney sat frozen in his seat. You know what qualifies me to discuss judicial nominees, Senator Romney? I've represented clients before judges who didn't understand the communities they served. I've watched judges with limited life experience make rulings that devastated families. And I've seen how judges who come from diverse backgrounds and experiences often deliver more just and thoughtful opinions. She leaned forward, looking directly at Romney. The perspective I bring as a civil rights attorney, as a black woman from Texas, as someone who's represented vulnerable Americans, is precisely what these discussions need. Not because of demographic boxes, but because justice requires understanding the full American experience, not just parts of it. Crockett then pulled out one final document, and since you brought up experience, Senator, I should note that before joining Congress, I litigated more cases in my legal career than you have in your entire life. I've drafted more legislation in 14 months than you have in the past 2 years. And according to constituent services metrics from the Congressional Management Foundation, my office has responded to more citizen inquiries in my first year than yours did in your first term. The room fell completely silent. Romney sat motionless, his face a mixture of shock and embarrassment. So yes, Senator Romney, I am newer to Congress than you, but I would respectfully suggest that different experiences, not just length of service, matter when evaluating judicial nominees who will serve all Americans, not just those from backgrounds like yours. Crockett set down her documents and looked Romney directly in the eyes. Does that answer your question about my qualifications, Senator Romney? Romney opened his mouth, then closed it again. For perhaps the first time in his political career, Mitt Romney was completely speechless. The chairman, after a moment of stunned silence, cleared his throat. "Senator Romney, do you have any further questions?" Romney fumbled with his papers. His composure shattered. "I yield my time, Mr. Chairman." The room erupted. Phones were already lighting up across the gallery as reporters rushed to file their stories. Several Democratic senators could be seen trying to suppress smiles. Even some Republicans on the committee looked impressed by Crockett's poise under pressure. The clip of Romney's questioning and Crockett's powerful response was already racing across social media platforms. Within minutes, it would become the political moment of the year, a textbook example of what happens when someone underestimates an opponent based on appearances rather than substance. By the time Congresswoman Crockett left the hearing room, her phone was buzzing non-stop with notifications. The exchange with Romney had already gone viral, spreading across social media platforms at lightning speed. The hashtag Crockett response was trending #1 on X, with Romney shut down close behind. In the hallway outside, reporters swarmed around her. "Congresswoman, how did you prepare for that response? Did you expect Senator Romney to question your credentials today? What was going through your mind when he brought up demographic boxes?" Crockett maintained her composure. "I came prepared to discuss judicial nominations. Senator Romney chose to question my qualifications instead. I simply answered his question with facts." Meanwhile, Romney slipped out a side door, his staff forming a protective barrier between him and the press. His communications director, looking grim, was already on the phone, likely strategizing damage control. Back in the hearing room, other senators were weighing in. Senator Elizabeth Warren approached the microphone during her allotted time. "Mr. Chairman, before I ask my questions, I'd like to commend Representative Crockett for her eloquent defense not just of her own qualifications, but of the importance of diverse perspectives in government. What we witnessed today was a reminder that experience comes in many forms, and that serving communities that have been historically underrepresented is valuable experience indeed." Senator Ted Cruz, hoping to salvage something for his party, took a different approach. "While I appreciate the Congresswoman's passion, I think we're getting distracted from the actual nominations before us today. Perhaps if we spent less time on personal confrontations and more time examining judicial records." But it was too late. The story of the day wasn't about judicial nominees anymore. It was about Jasmine Crockett's takedown of Mitt Romney. On social media, the response was explosive. Video clips of the exchange were being shared millions of times, often with captions like, "Watch, Romney tries to question Black Congresswoman's experience, instantly regrets it," or "This is what happens when you underestimate a woman of color." Democratic politicians were quick to rally around Crockett. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tweeted, "When they try to dismiss you as unqualified, come with receipts." At Jasmine Crockett, TX just gave a masterclass. "This is why we need diverse voices in Congress." Bernie Sanders posted, "Today at Jasmine Crockett TX reminded us that experience helping ordinary Americans is more valuable than experience helping corporations get richer. Proud to serve with her." Even some moderate Republicans privately expressed admiration for how Crockett handled herself. A senior Republican staffer, speaking anonymously to Politico, said, "Romney walked right into that one. He thought he was dealing with a freshman who would wilt under pressure." Big miscalculation. By evening, cable news was running the clip on repeat. CNN's Chiron read, "Romney silenced, Congresswoman's epic response to questioning of her credentials." Fox News took a different angle, heated exchange. Crockett and Romney clash over experience in Congress. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow devoted her opening segment to breaking down the exchange moment by moment. "What we saw today," Maddow said, "wasn't just a powerful comeback, it was a reminder of why Congress benefits from voices that haven't traditionally been heard in those chambers." Representative Crockett brought perspectives and experiences that someone like Senator Romney simply doesn't have. The White House, sensing political advantage, released a statement. "President Biden believes that our democracy is strengthened when people from all backgrounds and experiences serve in government. Today's exchange highlighted why that diversity of experience matters. Romney's office finally released a brief statement late in the evening. Senator Romney asked legitimate questions about experience in today's hearing. He respects Congresswoman Crockett's service and looks forward to working with colleagues across the aisle on important judicial matters. But the damage was done. Political analysts were already speculating about the longer-term implications. Romney miscalculated badly here, said a CNN political analyst. He thought he was exposing a weakness, but instead he gave Crockett a national platform to demonstrate her strengths. This is going to follow him for the rest of his term. On Morning Joe the next day, Joe Scarborough shook his head. I've known Mitt for years. He's better than what we saw yesterday. But he fell into the trap that too many established politicians do, assuming that newcomers, especially women of color, don't belong at the table. Crockett proved otherwise. The fallout continued for days. Editorial boards weighed in, with the New York Times publishing a piece titled "The Experience That Counts," arguing that Romney's dismissal of Crockett's credentials reflects a narrow view of what qualifies someone to serve in government. Political cartoonists had a field day. One widely shared cartoon showed Romney standing at a podium saying, "I question your experience," while behind him stood a towering stack of case files labeled Crockett's legal career. Fundraising emails from both parties leveraged the moment. Democratic committees sent messages with subject lines like, "Did you see what Jasmine did?" While Republican counterparts went with, "Stand with Romney against the radical left." For Crockett herself, the moment marked a turning point. Interview requests poured in from major networks. Her social media following tripled overnight. Democratic leadership began considering her for more prominent committee assignments. This is exactly why we need to keep electing people with different backgrounds to Congress, said a Democratic strategist on MSNBC. Representative Crockett brings perspectives from her work as a civil rights attorney that are crucial for discussions about our judiciary. Romney, meanwhile, faced questions from Utah constituents and reporters about whether he'd underestimated Crockett and whether his line of questioning had racial undertones. "I was simply asking about her experience," he told a reporter from the Salt Lake Tribune. That's a legitimate area of inquiry for anyone serving in Congress. But the reporter noted that Romney seemed uncharacteristically defensive during the brief interview. 2 weeks later, polling revealed the impact. Crockett's name recognition had skyrocketed, with 64% of Democrats nationwide now viewing her favorably. Romney's approval rating in Utah had dipped 5 points, with independent voters showing the biggest shift. Political scientists and communication experts began using the exchange as a case study. What Crockett did masterfully, explained a professor from Georgetown University, was turn Romney's attack on its head. Instead of getting defensive about her relatively short time in Congress, she reframed the entire conversation about what kinds of experience actually matter in governance. The moment even made its way into popular culture. A sketch on Saturday Night Live featured a Romney character repeatedly asking questions about experience, only to be increasingly devastated by detailed, factual responses. Late-night hosts incorporated the exchange into their monologues. Mitt Romney asked Jasmine Crockett about her experience, joked Stephen Colbert, and then got so thoroughly schooled he's now qualified for student loan forgiveness. For the judicial nominations that were supposedly the subject of the hearing, the impact was mixed. The spotlight on the process meant greater public attention to the nominees' backgrounds and philosophies. Progressive groups leveraged Crockett's points about the importance of judges understanding diverse American experiences. 6 months later, as a new round of judicial nominations came before the committee, observers noticed something telling. When Crockett entered the room to testify, several senators who had previously dismissed her seemed notably more respectful, and Romney, who had once been eager to challenge her credentials, remained conspicuously silent throughout her testimony. Political commentators noted the shift. "What we're seeing," said a CNN analyst, "is the lasting impact of that exchange." Representative Crockett established herself as someone who comes prepared and can't be easily dismissed. That changes how colleagues approach her. For Crockett herself, the moment had become part of her political identity, but not her entire story. In an interview with the Texas Tribune, she reflected, "That exchange got a lot of attention, But what matters most to me is using my position to help the people I represent. The attention is useful only if it helps me do that more effectively. The Romney-Crockett exchange had become more than just a viral moment. It represented a shifting power dynamic in American politics, where traditional credentials and established power were being challenged by new voices bringing different but equally valuable forms of experience to the table. As for what comes next, political observers are watching closely. Some speculate that Crockett's national profile could position her for higher office in Texas or a leadership role in Congress. Others wonder if Romney, facing re-election challenges and a changing Republican Party, might reconsider his political future. What's certain is that in the ongoing battle for who gets to define qualification and experience in American politics, Jasmine Crockett struck a blow that continues to resonate throughout the political landscape. The question now is, who will be the next established figure to underestimate a new voice in politics? And will they have learned from Romney's mistake, or are they destined to be similarly schooled? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more political confrontations that the mainstream media doesn't want you to see. Hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we drop our next video breaking down the biggest political showdowns happening in Washington.